Have you ever really thought about what goes on behind the scenes when a company decides your salary? It can feel kind of random, but it's actually driven by this incredibly powerful economic idea that scales up from a tiny business all the way to the entire global economy. Okay, let's get right into it.
So where does that number on your paycheck actually come from? I mean, is it just your experience, your negotiation skills, what the company can afford? Well, yeah, all those things matter. But underneath it all, there's a fundamental logic, a simple rule that applies to every single business out there.
To get to that rule, we're going to forget about big, complex corporations for a minute. Instead, we're going to build a business from scratch, a super simple pizza shop. And believe it or not, this little shop holds the key to understanding, well, everything. All right, so our pizza shop has just two things to worry about. First, we've got our fixed resource, one amazing, top-of-the-line pizza oven. That part doesn't change. And second, we have our variable resource, the cooks we hire to actually make the pizzas. The big question for us as the owner is, how many cooks should we actually hire?
Let's look at the numbers. With one cook, we're cranking out 100 pizzas an hour. Awesome. So we hire a second cook and our total output jumps to 180. Now wait a second. That second cook only added 80 pizzas, not another 100. Then we hire a third, we get to 210, but they only added 30 more. By the time we get to that fifth cook, they're only adding 2 extra pizzas an hour. So you see, the really important number here isn't the total, it's what each new worker brings to the table.
And this idea, it has a name. It's called marginal product. It's just a fancy way of saying, what's the extra stuff you get from adding one more of something? In our case, one more cook. So the second cook's marginal product was 80 pizzas. The third's was 30. This idea, right here, is the absolute bedrock of this whole thing.
Now, what we just saw happen in our little pizza shop, that's not just some random quirk. Nope, it's actually a fundamental law of economics in action.
And you can see it so clearly right here on this chart. That first cook is an all-star, a hero. The second one is still great. The third, they're helping. But by the fifth cook, they're barely moving the needle. And why is that? Well, think about it. They all have to share that one trusty oven. They start getting in each other's way, waiting for space. It just gets crowded.
And this phenomenon has a name, the law of diminishing returns. It's a cornerstone of all economics. It just means that when you have a fixed resource, like our oven, and you keep adding a variable one, like cooks, each new cook is eventually going to be less productive than the last. It's just a law of nature almost.
So now we get to the heart of it all. As the owner of this pizza shop, you face a very simple decision for every single person you think about hiring. On one hand, you have the value of the extra pizzas they're going to make, and on the other, you've got the wage you have to pay them. It's a balancing act. And here it is, the golden rule. A smart business owner is going to keep hiring people as long as the value they add is more than what they cost. You stop at the exact point where hiring one more person would cost you more in salary than they'd make you in pizza sales. That's the stopping point, period. Okay, in the language of economics, it looks like this. Now, don't let the letters scare you. It's actually really simple. It just says that in a competitive market, a worker's real wage, that's their wage after you account for prices, is set by their marginal product of labor, their MPL. Your pay is directly tied to the value you produce at the margin.
Now here's where it gets really, really cool. This logic, it's not just about hiring people, it applies to basically every business decision, including whether to invest in more stuff.
Yep, the exact same principle determines the return you'd get on your capital. So let's say we're thinking about buying a second pizza oven. How do we decide if that's a good move? Well, we use the exact same marginal thinking.
And we call this the marginal product of capital, or MPK. Sound familiar? It's the extra output you get from adding one more machine, or one more building, or in our case, one more pizza oven. It's the same idea we just used for our cooks, but for stuff instead of people.
So the decision is a perfect mirror image of the hiring decision. On one side, you've got the value of all the extra pizzas the new oven will help you make, and on the other side, you've got the cost of buying or renting that oven. You make the investment as long as the return is bigger than the cost. Simple as that.
Okay, so let's zoom out, way out. We've seen how one little pizza shop makes its decisions. But what happens when you have millions of businesses, from pizza shops to tech giants, all making these same calculations every single day? Well, it explains something huge.
All those tiny individual decisions, they all add up.
They literally determine how the entire economic output of a country, the whole economic pie, gets sliced and served. Every decision to hire, every decision to invest, when repeated millions of times, shapes the entire national economy.
And at the end of the day, all the income in a country is divided into two giant buckets. There's the share that goes to labor, that's all of us getting wages and salaries, and then there's the share that goes to capital, that's profits, rent, and interest. And the marginal productivity of each one is what decides how big its slice of the pie is.
Now, believe it or not, it all comes together in this one kind of beautiful equation. It says that the total output of an entire economy is simply the sum of what all the workers are paid, which is based on their marginal product, plus the sum of what all the capital earns, which is based on its marginal product. It's almost like a grand theory of everything for how income works.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? What do you absolutely need to remember? Well, first, your wage isn't just some random number. It's fundamentally linked to your marginal productivity. Second, the exact same rule applies to investments in things like machines and buildings. And finally, and this is the amazing part, this one simple rule connects your personal paycheck all the way up to the entire national economy.
And that brings us to one last really interesting question to chew on. What happens when some new technology comes along and makes our capital, our trusty pizza oven, suddenly twice as good? How does that change the whole equation for everyone's wages and for profits? Now that's some food for thought.